Good morning. And before we begin, firstly, Baruch Hashem, our first successful week. And the feedback I'm getting, it seems like people are enjoying it, are into it. So before we start, are there any outstanding issues that we want to address from last week's quota before we move forward? Is there anything? No? Okay. So again, if I'm moving too quickly, you have to tell me. I want feedback to make sure that everybody's moving along. Okay. So in advance, first of all, public service announcement. BH, we have our Taruvas summary booklets. I don't have them right here now, but Rabbi Shachat has them, so I'm going to pick them up today. And by Mincha today, you'll be able to pick them up, or tomorrow morning. That is number one. Number two, I have to apologize in advance that I'm going to finish the share a little earlier than usual, because way before this whole Simcha thing started, someone booked a unveiling. So I obviously, God willing, in the future that will not happen, obviously, because this is our priority. But this was booked way before the whole SEMICHA program was a concept. So I apologize in advance, but I think we'll be able to cover everything we need to. Okay, so let's dive right into it. Now, the truth is that our syllabus tells us to learn Aleph and Beis last week, 1 and 2, and then this week, Gimel, Dalet, and Hey, and then the week after that, Vav, Zayin, Ches. Now, really, if you look in the booklets, and that's the way it should be bunched together, Gimel belongs with Aleph and Beis. Dalet, Hey, Vav should be bunched together. 4 to 6 should be bunched together, and then 7, 8, 9. But I guess in the interest of spacing out our learning quota, they're moving it along. So, for example, this week we're doing Gimel, Dalet, Hey, 3, 4, and 5. 6 is a very small paragraph, which is really linked to 5. So you could do it you could do 20 minutes on your own this week just because it's continued, and then next week do 7, 8, 9. It doesn't really matter where you put number 6. So that's just a general, just to understand the layout. So considering that, today, there's like 2 introductions, one to Gimel, one to number 3, which is linked to 1 and 2, and then introduction to 4 through 7, or 4 through 6, I'm sorry, even though 6 belongs to next week's, it really is part of 4 and 5, which we're learning today. So 2 subjects then, and introduction to 2 of them. So if we're going by the order of the Shulchan Aruch, let's just go through what we did and what's coming. So Aleph, Sif 1, gave us this principle of Kavash Kamavushal. Number 1 gave us this principle that pickling things renders has the same power of cooking in terms of transferring flavor. That was number 1, Aleph. And what are you pickling in? Are you pickling it in juices? Are you pickling in salt? Are you pickling it in vinegar? And how long it takes for the transference to happen. That was Aleph 1. Beis and Gimel, 2 and 3, was Bishul, which is actual cooking. In number 2, we identified that cooking happens primarily or only in a Kli Rishon, in a primary vessel, right? That's where cooking happens. And then we learned the machlekes and the law with respect to Kli Sheni, the second vessel, and whether it has the ability does it not do any cooking at all, or does it do some to the point that you're required to remove the exterior layer, right? That was number 2. So that we described Bishul there. And now in number 3, we're continuing our subject of Bishul. Right, but the subject of Bishul in 3 is not like 2, where the 2 things are cooking equally at once. Right? In number 2, the 2 items are being cooked at once equally, either equally in a Kli Rishon, in a first vessel, or equally in a Kli Sheni. In number 3, the halacha is going to discuss when one is more advanced in its cooking than the other. Namely, if you have the bottom pot with, let's say, the non-kosher cold, but the thing that's coming in, the kosher food that's coming in, is hot and Kli Rishon status. Or the reverse. That which is on the bottom is hot and Kli Rishon, and the thing coming in is cold. Right? So whereas in Sif Beis, we discussed the 2 things are cooking together equally, and therefore the flavor moves equally between the 2. In this case, there's unequal level of cooking between the dish that you have versus the item falling into the dish. Hot bottom, cold top, or the reverse. Clear? So there's a slight distinction here between Gimel and Beis. That should help us see the difference.
Could thing coming in be a Kli Rishon status?
Oh, no, anybody can answer that question? How would the thing coming in have Kli Rishon status?
If it's sharp.
But it's Iroi, no? So if directed Kli Rishon, it's Iroi, it's being poured. Right, but then it's no longer Kiddushim, it's already out of the Kiddushim.
Exactly.
That's his question, no? How would you have Kiddushim status and something coming in? Good question, no? Anybody?
If it's very sharp, if it's sharp item.
So one is if it's still connected, maybe. Maybe if the stream is still connected, maybe. That'd be one way. And number two, sharp item, that would work for Krisha. Sorry?
The yellow thing was it the Chumrah that
We mentioned the Chumrah that if it's streaming, it still remains Kiddushim. But there's another way in which, no? Anyone else? Anyone? This is the other subject I want to address.
They don't know.
A ladle could be another one. A ladle could be another one where you put it into a ladle and the ladle retains Kiddushim status, and then you go and then you put it in. That could be another way. And another way is according to our chumrah, according to our stringency, where we treat solids like it's always a Kiddushim, right? So if a solid item falls into a liquid, so it's still Kiddushim status. But I'm saying that because we're going to learn. We learned last week the conclusion that we treat solid items as if it's still Kiddushim status, even though it's moved multiple times. But we're going to see today, we're going to see in this week's quota a dispute. And that's relevant because you're going to read the Ramah. You're going to read the Ramah and you're going to see, one second, he's treating solids in a klisheni like a klisheni, not like a Kiddushim. What's going on? We looked at solids remain Kiddushim the whole way. Yeah, relax, it's a dispute. And the Ramah is lenient, but we are stringent and treat this solid as if it's a Kiddushim even when it's removed outside. Clear so far?
When we spoke about, I don't remember, but we spoke about the solids that are Kiddushim, whose opinion?
No, that was the Rashal, I think, and Alter Rebbe follows that way as well.
It wasn't in the Pnim?
No, wasn't in the Pnim of the Shulchan Aruch, and you're going to see this week the Ramah actually treats a.
So we don't know the Ramah until now.
Till now, in Siv Gimel, we're going to learn that the Ramah's opinion is, or it's going to be implied from the Ramah, that solids, as it moves, changes status from Kiddushim to Sheni to Shlishi and so on, but we do not rule that way. It's not practically. Yeah, okay, clear? All right, so in this question of two different levels, top one hot, bottom one cold, or the reverse, which one dominates? And we're going to learn the halacha, which comes from Shmuel in the Gemara in Psachim, that Tataah Gavar. So that would be our first principle we're learning here. Tataah Gavar, which means the bottom one dominates. The temperature of the two things are determined by the one on the bottom. So if the bottom is a Kiddushim, and you're putting something cold inside, we treat the whole thing like a Kiddushim, and the flavor goes through all the way. Because the bottom is Kiddushim. If the bottom is cold, and that which is coming in is hot, the bottom dominates, which would mean, therefore, really, everything should be treated as cold, and the halacha when two things that interact are cold is just wash it off, right? Which is what the Gemara first says, that if the bottom dominates, and the bottom is cold, then the thing which comes in, all I have to do is wash off, right? Because it's two, following? We're treating the bottom, in other words, which temperature do we halacha consider? That which is on the bottom or that which is on top coming in? And the halacha determines that we go with the temperature of that which is on the bottom. So if I have an ice bath of non-kosher food, and then a kosher piece of meat that's very hot falls in, if I'm going by the bottom temperature, then the whole thing is cold, rinse it off, and you're good to go. However, the Gemara counter argues and says, okay, we get it that the bottom is what dominates. But by the time the thing on the top cools down, there's going to be some extraction of flavor, some transference. It doesn't cool down in an instant. It takes time for the thing on top to cool down in that ice bath. Yeah? So there's got to be some transference. And therefore the Gemara says, yeah, okay, you're right. There's going to be a little bit of transference, and therefore you have to remove a little bit of a layer of the outside of the kosher item in order for it to be kosher. Clear? Yeah? So a non-kosher cold soup, hot piece of chicken goes in. So the bottom one dominant is cold, but by the time the chicken cools down, it still absorbs something, and therefore you have to remove the outer layer of the chicken, and then it's good to go. That's the halacha. Clear? Okay. Now, what happens if it's in the reverse? This is not going to be mentioned clearly in the Shulchan Aruch, and when I was reading it, it was baffling. Like, what do I do? How do I understand this? And then, thanks to this little sefer, he explained it for me. So, let's say it's the reverse. You have kosher cold soup and non-kosher piece of meat. So the non-kosher meat you're throwing out. But what now happens to this cold soup? Can I drink it?
Possibly.
Let's say it's the reverse.
There's
The
no
bottom
layer,
is cold.
no layer.
Oh, there's no layer to remove. It's a soup. I scoop out a layer of the soup. What do I do? So it's not going to be our subject here. It's going to be the subject of chapter 91. But when you see it and it comes to you, just know that it's going to be addressed. That question comes to you. It's going to be addressed in chapter 91, where there's going to be a dispute as to whether or not you have to have 60 to the ratio of what would have been the layer in the whole soup, or because there's no layers, we ignore the whole thing to begin with. There's going to be a dispute about that, which we'll get to.
Piece that falls into the cold soup, is it hot or is it cold?
So in this case, the piece that fell in is hot, the soup is cold, but the bottom dominates, and therefore all you need to do is remove an outer layer. But in this case, the non-kosher fell in, so the non-kosher you're throwing out. But you have a kosher soup in the bottom. How do you remove a layer from a soup?
But the bottom only dominates if it's hot.
The bottom always dominates, whether it's cold or hot. So we go by the temperature of the bottom one. If hot, everything is hot, transference all the way. If bottom is cold, only a little bit of transference between the time that the top falls down.
Depends on what falls in.
No, because this is the last thing that me and Elliot were learning, and
Yeah.
basically we were looking at it, and obviously the laws of physics are such that heat rises and cold drops. So if a cold piece of meat is on top of a hot piece of meat, meaning the bottom is hot, then everything becomes forbidden. But if it's the opposite, then it becomes
Then you only have to
there's
remove an outer
leniency.
layer.
Exactly.
That's what we're talking about now.
Right, but
So
now
the
you're
bo-
talking about a piece of meat that's going in like a solid going into a liquid.
Correct, yeah.
Which
Because the
is
solid is a
different
kedushin, we should say.
Right.
We're treating it kedushin, and it's falling into a cold soup.
Right,
So really, because the bottom is dominant and cold, all you really need to do is remove a layer.
the layer of whatever fell in.
Right, but what fell in now is
But you
the
don't
scenario I'm giving is
need
that
it,
the thing that fell in is non-kosher, so I'm throwing it out. It's the soup that I want to keep. So how do I remove a layer of the soup?
You're saying that the piece of meat is hot and
Non-kosher,
Yeah.
and a
good.
kosher soup on the bottom, cold. How do I remove a layer of soup? I can't. So that's going to be discussed in chapter 91, a dispute about how to deal with that. So I'm just telling you to keep that in mind because the question is going to come up. Okay. I already mentioned that we mentioned this last week already, the dispute, and I mentioned this again. The Ramah is going to indicate that solids as they move from Kedushin to Sheni actually change status, which we do not rule that way. We rule that it remains Kedushin as it moves, and that's going to be relevant in this week's quota. Okay. Likewise, the same question is going to arise in the Ramah with regard to, do we have the same principle with respect to vessels? So you have a hot vessel and a cold piece of a hot meat vessel or a hot non-kosher vessel, and a piece of kosher falls on top of it. Do I say at the bottom, or the reverse? Cold plate, which is probably more common, a cold plate and a hot piece of a cold empty plate that is non-kosher, and it absorbed within the last 24 hours, right? So the flavor is a positive flavor. It's ben yoimai, and therefore nice and tam lishvach, the flavor is good. And then a hot piece of kosher meat falls onto this cold non-kosher plate. What's the halacha? So if I go with the opinion that the bottom is dominant, then all I have to do is cut off a layer piece of meat where it touched the cold plate, and I'm good to go with the rest of the meat. But as we're going to learn, there's an opinion which says that Rashal, it's going to come in the Shach is the Taz is going to quote that, I think, for the Shach as well. The Rashal is of the view that this whole question of bottom and top dominant is only true of two food items, not of dishes. And therefore, in the Rashal's view, if either is hot, whether the plate is hot or the food is hot, it's full transference and the whole thing is not kosher.
There's no way around it, basically.
Correct. The Rashal's view is machmir. Because there's no such thing as bottom being dominant, therefore the fact that the bottom is cold is not relevant to the fact, is not relevant to be lenient with regard to the hot piece of meat. We ignore the principle of bottom rules, and therefore if there's any heat, it's not kosher. That's Rashal's view, is much more stringent. Okay. But nonetheless, we're not going to be stringent in this case, even though we have been stringent like Rashal, not in this case. So which means if a hot piece of meat fell into a cold, non-kosher plate, you just have to remove the outer layer, and that's going to come up in your text as well.
How do we measure the outer layer? Like
It's
that-
literally
what does that
like a
mean?
potato peel. Literally like take a peeler and peel off. That's it. Literally that much. In a minute, we're going to see something we have to do more. In a minute, we're going to do something that's a bit more than that. But for now, it's literally like a peel. Klipa, the word is klipa. Kedei klipa, the amount of
sheave.
a shell,
Yeah.
which is like literally like a peel.
But klipa really has to do with the sheave of like of a barley, so it's very, very thin.
Yeah, it's literally, klipa is literally a peel.
Yeah.
So like the way you peel an apple, peel a potato, that's it. Very, very, very little. It's a millimeter, 2 millimeters, something like that. I just saw somewhere the amount, I think it's 2 or 3 millimeters. Literally nothing. Literally, very little. Okay. Now, the last thing we're going to have in number 3, we clear so far?
Yeah.
The last thing we're going to have in number 3 is part of this principle of the bottom dominates. So the question becomes like this. The Ramah is going to say that if you have a lamp with non-kosher oil, it's burning with fats that are not kosher, and then I take a kosher olive oil and I start pouring it into that non-kosher lamp because I want to add more oil to my candle to make it last longer, let's just say, right? But in the meantime, there's hot oil here that's not kosher, and I'm pouring kosher oil into it. So it says the Ramah, you shouldn't do that. Why? 2 different opinions. Why? What's the problem? What's the problem with pouring olive oil into hot non-kosher oil?
Because the steam of the non-kosher will go up and affect what's coming in from the
So it's built on the principle that Tataah, Gavar, the bottom dominates, and the bottom here is hot non-kosher. So it's going to affect the kosher olive oil that's being poured in. But there are 2 different opinions as to why that is. One opinion is that this is not mentioned directly in the Shulchan Aruch, but it's going to be relevant. One opinion is that the stream, while you're pouring olive oil, there's a stream. So like the flavor travels up the stream of olive oil, rendering because the bottom's hot, and therefore you shouldn't do it because there's like a continuum of connection between non-kosher hot on the bottom and your kosher olive oil. Option A, opinion A. Opinion B is like you just said because of the steam.
But what if
Because of the steam of the olive oil of the non-kosher oil affecting the kosher oil.
That wouldn't matter if you interrupt the flow.
Oh, so it wouldn't matter if you interrupt the flow. If it's a question of steam, if you splashed it, it would have the same problem because the steam still rises.
But what if the bottom part doesn't have steam? It's a solid, like it turned into a solid. So the fat became
That would be another distinction. That would be another distinction.
Pouring it in, and that item that you're pouring in is hot, and it goes on top. So there's no steam coming from.
That would be another distinction. If there's no steam, does it matter or not? So they quote here in this book from the Alter Rebbe, which rules that who says that the reason is because of the stream and not because of the steam, and therefore if there is an interruption in the stream, then the non-kosher flavor wouldn't travel upward. But at any rate, as you're going to see in the Ramah, this is only only the first instance. But if it did happen, you can be lenient. Okay, that's an overview of number 3. Any questions before we go to number 4 through 6? No, clear? Yeah? Okay, that's number 3. And I mentioned this connects to Bishul, because we're talking about the laws of cooking, which cooking, as we learned, definitionally includes liquids. And it's the hot liquid, this cooking process that shares the flavors. Either you're cooking 2 items together in a pot, and therefore the flavors go together because it's in this big stew, or as we're learning now in Siv Gimel, where you're pouring, or one thing is falling onto another, but it's falling onto another where there is liquid, and thus there's bishul happening, there's cooking happening that causes the transfer of flavor. Clear? The next yeah, we're clear. Next section, which is 4 through 6, even though today,
don't have 4 to 6.
no, we have the booklets. I'm going to pick them up today. The actual books. The next section, which goes through 4 to 6, even though our quota ends at 5, 6 we're going to learn the next week. And as I mentioned at the beginning, 6 is a very small paragraph. You can learn it together. It'll take you 10, 15 minutes. It's not long, and it's connected to 4 and 5. So 4, 5, and 6 is going to be the halachas of what we would call, they call it tzliya, which is dry cooking. Which is, I don't want to call it tzliya because tzliya is roasting. It's dry cooking, which means basically either baking or grilling, where you're cooking, but no liquid that causes a transference between one thing and the other, right? So if you're baking 2 pieces of bread in a oven, what transference of flavor is there between the 2? If you're cooking a stew, certainly there's transference of flavor, right? Because there's liquid that would bring the flavors all together, mix them all up. That's your challah, that's your stew, that's your soup. But 2 pieces of cake sitting side by side in an oven, what's there to cause a transference of flavor?
Right.
So we're going to leave the question of zeya, of steam, out for a moment, and let's just imagine you're 2 pieces of steak on the grill. Well, where's the flavor transference though? Via what? Via what is the flavor transference between one piece of steak and the other? They're being
on an open grill.
let's say an open grill. An open grill. Sorry? Oh, so the fat burning is going to be irrelevant here. That's when the issue of whether something's fatty or not becomes relevant. Clear? Because now there's no food, there's no liquid to transfer the flavor. There's only the liquid that the food items themselves have. right? And that's going to become the question now when you have two pieces of meat that are touching when they're grilling. Do they transfer flavor between each other? If they're not touching, they're not touching. Where's the transference of flavor? But after touching, so kosher piece of meat, non-kosher piece of meat touching, there's got to be some level of transference. And what level of transference is there? Is there?
We can also change it and get a grill or a pot.
So correct. The pot would be
Or
cooking
an
now.
oven, An oven.
The pot is cooking because the pot creates juice.
Exactly.
That's the whole point here. This is cooking, but not liquid. So it's tzliya, which is roasting, or Afiyah, baking, where there's no liquid to cause a transference. Clear? So that's the new section here between 4 and 5, between 4 and 6, I'm sorry. How do we treat that? How do we treat that? Now, in the English summaries, they don't even mention it, but in the Shulchan Aruch it is mentioned. So I'm going to explain what the halacha is, because this is the origin of the halacha in the Gemara. The origin of the halacha in the Gemara is respect to Gid HaNashe. So Gid HaNashe is the sciatic nerve,
So,
which is forbidden to eat. It's forbidden food, right? It's I think it's in the filet mignon, right? Which is why kosher filet mignon is so expensive, because you have to pay somebody who knows how to extract the sciatic nerve.
the
A
Yemenites-
process called nicker.
I thought it was not possible.
In
It is
Israel,
possible.
they
It's called
have-
nicker.
Yeah.
My shver, my father-in-law's learned
I thought it
nicker.
was like the actual, like they call it thing,
Right,
it's
that's
kosher,
what
but
I
it's
thought
not the
also.
actual.
Up until
It's
recently,
not,
they
because
didn't
in
have-
many places it's just too expensive and too cumbersome, and they don't rely on extraction of a sciatic nerve, so they just cut the whole thing out.
But it's theoretically possible.
But theoretically, it's possible. That's
Oh,
called
but your
possible.
father-in-law in Australia.
My
they-
father-in-law does
yeah.
nicker. He does.
No, I don't think we could get that
He
here.
does it for
My
the
father-
backhand also.
He's an expert on nicker. This is one of his.
It's very interesting because
That's
up
pretty
until recently in Montreal, there was no such thing because they get rid of the whole bottom to begin.
Yeah,
with.
yeah.
It's
It's
cheaper to do that.
cheaper.
It's easier
I
to
think
do
there
that.
is no such thing still
There's
here.
no-
But in Israel, the Yemenites
There are
are
many
the ones
communities that do
who
nicker.
taught. They're the ones
Many
who taught
communities do
most
nicker.
of the mumchim today.
My father-in-law does
I
nicker.
guess.
Yeah. So yeah, he does it. He does nicker. I don't know how often or when or on demand or whatever.
But
But
you do
he does
nicker
it.
even in the front also. It's not just in the bottom.
It's where the sciatic nerve is. It's only in the back. No reason to do it anywhere else.
But there's also
Sorry, sorry.
Yeah.
It's nerve and the fat around it. Okay, so now the question. That's right. So now, if you take that piece of meat which has static nerve in it and you grill it, so you have kosher meat mixed with non-kosher. What's the halacha?
The chaylev.
So says the Gemara like this: you can just eat off the meat and stop when you get to the static nerve. Don't eat it. That's it.
Really though?
But the Gemara goes, whoa, hold on a second. Is there no transference of flavor happening here? What's
Doesn't
going
exist in
on?
Montreal, anyways. By the way, no matter what.
What's going on? Is there not transference of flavor? Can you really say such a thing? And this is where the Gemara says, well, it depends if it's lean or fatty.
Mm.
If the meat is a fatty piece of meat, and it's going to be transference of flavor all over because you have liquid running through it, causing transference. But if it's lean, there's no liquid, there's no fat, there's no liquid, there's no transference, and therefore all you have to do is leave behind a little peel, right? That's right. And this is where the halacha comes from. When you have two dry pieces of meat next to each other and they're touching, all you need to do is remove a peel layer of the point of contact.
Here it's more than that. Even if it's steam, if you think the thing is inside.
That's how close it is. It's mamish so close.
Like bonded.
That's right. It's bonded, and yet still, all you need to do is remove if it's lean, all you need to do is remove just stop at a klipa, stop at a thin layer of peel.
So inner liquid is not considered anything.
But no, so if it has inner liquid,
Everything is
it's fatty piece of meat, then it's going to be transferred.
lean.
But it's lean,
I'm saying it's blood, it's whatever.
Yeah, lean
Oh.
still has liquid in it.
It's not considered.
and therefore there are more rules. And therefore there are more rules. Ein ono b'kinyan being chisha l'shmina. We are not proficient in the distinction between what's fatty and what's lean. We don't have we don't know where the line is. We don't know where the exact line is between fatty and lean. And therefore we treat everything as fatty in the Ramah's view. And therefore this is a big difference between Sephardim and Ashkenazim. If someone following the Shulchan Aruch directly and there's two pieces of meat, kosher, non-kosher, grilled on a steak, the Sephardi would just have to peel, or whoever's following the Machaber, I don't know if all Sephardim do, but if they were following the Shulchan Aruch directly, they just have to take a peel off the end of the steak and eat the rest of the steak, even though if it was lean. If it was lean steak, if it was a Montreal steak, I'm kidding, but if it was a lean steak, but if it's a fatty steak, then the liquid makes the transfer. But in Ashkenazic land, following Ramah, we don't know the difference between lean and fat. Therefore, we treat all of it as if it's fat, and the transfer goes when two pieces of meat are grilled next to each other. That's the Ramah's view. This is going to be in 3 and 4. Okay,
So this is.
4 and 5. I'm sorry. Yes, thank you.
This is learned to set from Gid HaNashe.
Yes, the original halacha is in Gid HaNashe. Yes. Now there's going to be an exception, and this is going to be a relevant subject. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything else. Yeah. Okay, there's going to be an important point. as the Shulchan Aruch is going to rule, it doesn't make a difference which one's fatty, whether the kosher is fatty or the non-kosher is lean, or the kosher is fatty and the non-kosher is lean. So long as there's fat in either, there's liquid and there's transference of flavor. Doesn't matter which one is the one that, but it doesn't make a difference to us according to Ramah anyway, because we again don't make a difference between lean and fatty. We treat it all as if it is fatty anyway. I wonder if actually Sephardim follow this ruling. I don't know.
Also not right.
It's rarely practical. There is a practical thing.
Maybe if you say perhaps in the Huga or something like that.
Yeah, maybe situations like that. But there is, for example, it's not quite clear, but let's say, for example, how far do you take it when you say that we treat all dry as if it was fatty? Like, for example, chametz on Pesach, bread next to the matzah. That's considered also, we're not sure if it's fatty. Maybe there's transference of flavor. I mean, it's mamish dry. Or do I say, no difference between fatty and lean, even if it's a dried out matzah, I treat it as if it was fatty. Do I really do that? So there might be limitations on that to say that we don't know when there's fatty and lean. Meat, we don't know when it's fatty and lean. But a piece of bread, I know it's dry. It's dry. It's not like a maybe it's lean. That maybe it's fatty. That's not a thing. And that's going to come in the Shulchan Aruch as well at the end of number, I want to say end of number 5. I'm going the wrong way. Which am I going? Yeah, then number 5, I think it is. Yeah, then the number 5. Yeah, the type of forbidden thing which is not possible to have any fat and is definitely lean, then you only have to actually it's more than a peel. I'm sorry, it's more than a peel. That's what I want to say. Before we were talking about a peel where you have if the bottom is cold and top is hot, all you have to do is take off a peel, which is very, very thin, like a millimeter. Here it's a bit more than a peel. It's called kedei netila, enough to be like a significant amount of removal, which is a bit more than a peel.
Half a thumb.
It's a half a thumb. That's right. I'm sorry. I kept on saying peel. It's not correct. I mentioned this before. There's difference. Sometimes it's a peel, which is mamish just a lean. So I'm sorry. So if we're going back to the Sephardim, it's not going to be taking a peel. It's going to be taking a knife and slicing off half a thumb thick. So it's a bit thicker than just a peel. I'm sorry. Yes, my mistake. I knew that there was a problem there. So let's make it clear. That's right. In the case of Sif Gimel, in the Sif Gimel case, we are talking about bottom cold, top hot. All I have to do is peeler. In the case of Sif Dalad Hay and Vav, which is going to be 2 pieces of meat next to each other, and it's not fatty, the transference is not the amount of a peel, but the thick of a half a thumb, which is called kedei netila, enough to be removed.
And it's not dry.
If it's dry, then you do have to remove that half a peel. But if it's lean, then if it's fatty, then the whole thing transfers. The whole thing is forbidden. If it's fatty, turns into liquid, the whole thing is forbidden. If it's dry, that's when you take off that amount.
The kilua part, we didn't speak about fatty, non-fatty. I remember.
We talked about kiluach,
I mean, the Rishon you said that.
the irregularity.
What were you talking about?
I mean,
You said Gimel. What
I
were you
don't
talking
ever.
about? What was it?
Recording in progress.
Sorry?
Food on top of each other. So
Oh,
hot
you
soup
brought
and-
it before.
Yeah. Okay. Finally, did I miss anything? Wait, there's something I missed over here I want to say. Oh,
2 loaves of bread that are dry.
yeah. So you still have to take off them. Yeah. If one's kosher, one's not kosher, you would take off a thickness of a thumb.
Yes, if they're touching,
If they're touching, yes.
right, but not if they're not.
Okay, but if
independently
they're an
in
enclosed
an oven.
if they're an enclosed oven, the laws are going to be different, as we're going to learn when we get to the laws of Zeya. Zeya means like I'm sorry?
Seed.
No, that's Zera. Zeya is sweat or perspiration. And the perspiration of the oven might have a different halacha, which we'll get to in another time. Because the Zeya is different. But here we're talking about open area where there's no trapped steam in an open on a stovetop or on a grill top where it's open. If it's closed, then there's a different issue of Zeya, which we'll get to.
Didn't
later.
non-Jewish people and Jewish people used to share a communal oven, like for bread, baking bread and stuff?
Right, so that's because it was open air.
The double wrap.
No, but it was closed in an
Well,
oven.
Morocco.
No, so in this case, yeah, if it's completely closed,
Morocco, they put it
Well,
down.
that-
Everyone has their own crock pot.
so in those cases, each one has its own covering.
Yeah.
And therefore, all the only problem might be is Zeya, the steam, and because your thing is closed, that's the double wrap issue. The steam doesn't get through. That's the whole idea of double wrap. But that's going to be a different simon when we get to the discussion about steam. But here here nothing's closed. It's open air, so there's no steam. It's just a question of touching transference.
No, that's a whole.
I'll tell you, buddy. Okay, there was something else I want to cover. Oh. So even though the Rama writes that there's no difference between lean and fat, we don't know the difference, and therefore even if it's lean meat, we treat it if it's fatty, and therefore the flavor transfers all the way through. If non-kosher and kosher meat were touching each other, the whole flavor would transfer all directions, even though it looks lean to us. We don't make that distinction. Nonetheless, we still learned last week where we do make a difference between lean and fatty. With respect to kavosh k'mavoshel, with respect to salt pickling, where if half the meat is protruding out of the pickling, if it's fatty, the flavor transfers up. If it's lean, it doesn't. So the fact that the Ramah says we don't know the difference between fatty and lean is only with respect to the stricter issue of cooking, not with respect to the lenient issue of kavosh k'mavoshel, of kavosh k'mavoshel, half sticking out of the brine. Where if it's lean, it doesn't travel up. So like each of these things have qualifiers.
Which part are you saying is not the kavush k'mavoshel you said before is the item?
Yes.
So where's the leniency?
So the leniency is that our not knowing what's considered lean and fatty won't be applied to the issue of kvisha. We have a few different cases where kvisha is not mamish like bishul. There's a few different issues that we have. We mentioned them last week. This was one of them. I don't remember. There's other things also that we mentioned that were not, where kvisha and mavishal is not exactly the same. Even though kavash and mavishal is deraisa, yes, that's true. Oh, and Basar B'chalav, where it's the Rabbanon, that's right. Where Basar B'chalav, that's right. And that's where we had it, Basar B'chalav. Where Basar B'chalav, milk and meat, biblically speaking, is only forbidden when it's cooked together. And pickling wasn't considered cooked in that regard. So it's only rabbinically forbidden, not biblically forbidden. And therefore, if there's a doubt, we're lenient. Right? We learned that also. That was another difference. That's right. Thank you. Okay. I apologize that I'm finishing earlier than usual. But any before we go, any questions or everything was clear?
Do you hate?
So yeah, hey, Dalet and Hay is going to be a continuation of each other. 4 and 5 are continuation, both covered in what we just spoke about. And the truth is 6 also. You can learn 6 part of it also. You might as well. And because it's mamish, a small little 6 is a small paragraph that just flows from the same subject of grilling next to each other. Yeah? Everything clear? Any questions you want to address?
No.
No. Okay. So thank you very much. And good to have feedback. People are asking me questions privately, and I'm responding, but put them in the group so everybody can see the questions and everybody can see the answers, and then we can kind of group communal learn like that. Okay, wonderful week, everybody. And Wednesday night, B'ez Hashem, we'll meet here for our halacha l'maisa, a chazara l'maisa, reviewing plus practical tips from the various different things we're learning. Okay, wonderful week and wonderful day, everybody.